Hello, I'm Joel Blackford with Beth Chesed Sabbath Fellowship. We are not meeting at the 1631 building, so call first before you would want to attend. We will have to be moving at some point in time. Right now, all of our stuff is there, and maybe by a miracle we'll go back there again, but right now it doesn't look good. We discuss the philosophy of eschatology, what you need to know, your reality, your existence. We try not to be disparate, especially today with the topic today. We're Beth Chesed Sabbath Fellowship. The Seven Seals, my eschatology, that's quite unique from other people's eschatology. And what if I'm correct? What happens if that's the case? So, not this coming Thursday, but next Thursday. So that would be after July 4th. I will be interviewed by the Prophecy Roundtable, which is John Haller, Doug Hamp, and Scott Harwell. Nice guys. Because I asked them so many Bible geek questions, they have well, they haven't officially invited me yet, but it sounds like they'll be bringing me on um, after July 4th, whatever Thursday night that would be. And so, great guys. I enjoy them. Part of the reason why I don't gig out much is that I don't always agree with the other presenters. And you know, there are such disagreements. Why get up there and say fight it out with them? Whereas with these three guys, I generally agree with them or respect them. That's also very, very important. Some people I really don't respect because they're not doing proper research. They're just, these three people are doing the research. They're trying to dig deep. And so you have to respect that. And they're not dogmatic. John Haller, say, is a research hoover. I mean, he's literally a vacuum cleaner sucking up data. And Doug is quite open to ideas, and Scott is a little bit newer to this, but still, with his law background, he knows discovery. So anyway, that'll be coming up soon. And so we're going to be discussing the birth pangs. I'll be discussing the seals specifically, but I call them the birth pangs, and we'll see where they agree or disagree with me. Things like deception, dissension, devastation, disease, disasters, death, disloyalty, delusion, defection, and declaration of Yeshua as the Mashiach. So we should be expecting these birth pangs to occur, these bad things to occur, and one good thing. And then the rise of false prophets and other, you can see it on the right-hand side, famines and these things. People are noticing these things, especially, there's so many false prophets out right now. The believers are growing cold. Morals are becoming less accepted. This is a Lifeway poll, but it's very accurate. These are the birth pangs, and I argue they're the seals, six of the seven seals. When and what are the birth pangs? Well, according to Micah, but you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, are one of the little clans of Judah. From you shall come forth for me one who is to rule Israel, whose origin is from old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until that time when she who is in labor has brought forth, and then the rest of his kindred shall return to the people of Israel. So the rest of these Israelites shall come back to Israel, and then and they will stay put. And as he grows great, to the very ends of the earth. But then, if you go to verse 6 of Micah 5, you'll see that the man shall be their peace when the Assyrian comes into our land, and when he shall tread on our palaces, then we shall raise against him 7 shepherds, 8 principled men. So, the Assyrian is probably the Antichrist. So that's very end times-ish. So I looked at those types of verses, these birth pangs verses, and I said, we need to put the birth pangs into the model, the end times model. So this is my oldest one where I just kind of said, well, let's just draw a line and do it in a linear fashion. But we have narrative breaks. It reads like the Torah. So John reads like Moses, so to speak. And so most of the eschatologists believe the 7 seals occurred during the final 7 years. I believe that that's because they almost all come out of the doctrine of imminence. I was a pre-trib rapture believer for 48 years of my life, 46 years. And so I'm arguing that your mama knows when she was pregnant. The 7 seals resemble the birth pangs. You can observe them. You can verify them. There is no conclusion that the seal 7. You go through. It's a continuation to the 7 trumpets, then the 7 bowls. It's linear, like creation is linear, and 7. And observing the Sabbath is linear and 7. Also, if you do 40 weeks divided by 2,000 years, the Yovel years of 50 each, you're going to come up with 50. So 40 divided by 2,000 is 50. Yeah, no doubt about it. So, funny story. One of the top scholars out there is Bill Cloud. He's friends with Perry Stone. Perry doesn't really listen to him on most things, but he does listen to him on Hebraic thought. So years ago, Bill Cloud came to town. He's come here a few times. And I said, hey, Bill, let's talk about the seals. And he went, art, like I was a circus seal. And most theologians don't talk about the seals. It's just not that important. And so this guy is a top theologian, and he literally started barking like a seal at me. And he had no idea that I was talking about the 7 seals. And he did get serious. I mean, he's a nice guy, but it was kind of funny to be mocked again. So we do the philosophy of eschatology, of the end of days. We try not to twist the Bible. We try not to give you fake prophecy. We give you some good sources. I think, part of the reason also is them recommending these 3 guys because I enjoy their show. Once again, they're not dogmatic, and so I would be unique to them because I do study out modern prophets, and I'm not very impressed with them right now. And then the news, they do the news. John Haller does the best news show out there on Sundays. He is, once again, a vacuum cleaner of all news, and he does a nice job presenting it. So once again, we're going to go through some of these verses. You've done this with me before, but we're going to go through it again. Zephaniah 3, 8, and 9 is really important. And once again, no timing is listed on these particular birth pangs. So therefore, wait for me. During the birth pangs, it doesn't say that, but wait for me, says Adonai, for the day when I rise to witness against you, when I decide to assemble nations, to gather kingdoms together, to pour out on them my indignation, all my fierce anger. That's Armageddon. Okay, for all the earth will be consumed in the fire of my passion, for then I will change the peoples so that they will have pure lips to call on the name of Adonai, all of them, and to serve him with one accord. Okay, once again, no more timing on this one either. There's no idea of when these labor pains occur. As a pregnant woman is about to give birth, cries out and writhes in labor pains. So we have been at your presence, Adonai. We have been pregnant and have been in pain, but we, as it were, have given birth to the wind. We have not brought salvation, which is Yeshua in the Hebrew text, to the land, and those inhabiting the world have not come to life. Your dead will live, my corpses will arise. That is the resurrection. And awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust, for your dew is like the morning dew, and the earth will bring the ghost to life. Isaiah 26 is part of Isaiah 24 through 27, which is like Revelation for the Old Testament. No timing in Jeremiah in all 4 of these. If you want to read them, basically it's labor pain, labor pain, labor pain. But the interesting thing is the second one here, Jeremiah 30, is can a man bear a child? But yet the man during these end times will have his hands on his stomach like a woman in labor. And that's what's happening right now as things are changing. Anguish and sorrows. And then here's the bottom one that I like the most. Behold, one shall mount up and fly swiftly like an eagle. That's kind of like saying the second Exodus, and spread his wings against Bozrah, which is where Yeshua is going to go first. Okay, Petra down in the southeast of Jerusalem. And the heart of the warriors of Edom, that's where Petra would be, Gog Magog, shall be in that day like the heart of a woman in her birth pangs. So there you go. That's Jeremiah 49:22. So why are my videos different, and why would these 3 gentlemen invite me on their show? Because I argue that the 7 seals sound like Matthew 24 birth pangs. And I argue about the 7 seals. I argue that they're opening right now, and we're observing them. I argue that you knew you were pregnant if you're a woman. You knew your body was changing as you got closer to delivery. Your birth pangs were expected and part of the plan. You looked forward through the pain to the wonderful birth. Your birth pangs were irregular at first, and then they became regular. Your water broke. You didn't push until your cervix was dilated to a 10. Male pastors don't really listen to their wives on this kind of stuff. Eschatology, they believe, is just for the experts, and so they interpolate it, not always working off the text itself. So I believe that you ask your wife or you ask your mom about the birth pangs, and you're probably going to get a better idea of what birth is all about. So, birth pangs. As always, this is my chart. The birth pangs come first, and they're the seals. Then the tribulation is the first 3.5 years of the trumpets, and then the great tribulation is 3.5 years of the bowls. And so I argue that the 2 witnesses show up before the trumpets start, and they leave just before the bowls start. And why doesn't God tell us specifically when these occur? When do the birth pangs begin? When do they cease? Why doesn't God tell us when the trumpets and the bowls occur? He doesn't. Deal with it. This is my plan of how it works. About every 6 months, you'll see a trumpet, then another trumpet, then another. So they go by the moedim, spring, fall, because every there is only a full moon celebration like Passover and Sukkot during a full moon. And so I'm arguing that it would be announced on the first of the month, and it would be delegated out on Tishri 15 or 14, depending upon that time frame, about every 6 months. So that's how I argue it. And then the Antichrist shows up during the last 3.65 years, which is 42 months, which is his time frame, and he only gets that amount of time to go just cause mayhem. And so that's how I work it out through the seals and the bowls. Part of my source for how this occurred was that I was digging through the plagues of Egypt, and I saw that it sounded like, according to Rashi or Rambam, I can't remember which one, that Moses would catch Pharaoh early in the morning as he was going down to take a poo by the Nile, because gods don't take a public poo. And so he went down there, caught him, and announced it on the new moon. And then by the full moon, the judgment would occur for about a week or so. And then they'd have about 7 days at the end to recover. And then it would be announced at the next new moon. So I'm arguing that there should be some kind of a plan on this. Now, I'm going to be showing you a few different plans from other people, and you know what? I'm not dogmatic, so if I'm wrong, I will apologize. This is the pre-wrath plan, and this is from the pre-wrath site, pre-wrath resource center. And so they're really, arguing the same verses that I argue, which is Matthew 24, 4 through 8. People coming in Jesus' name saying, I am the Messiah, deception due to false Christ, wars, rumors of wars, nations, kingdoms, famines, earthquake, plagues. And I'll be citing some more specific about that. They are citing that this is similar. At this time, these birth pangs will align with the opening of the first 4 seals in Revelation 6, 1 through 8. I didn't expect to see that. So that's way on the lower left-hand side here. So it doesn't indicate a specific timing, but it does seem to align with that. So it's interesting that they agree with me. Nobody ever agrees with me. It's very rare. These guys don't agree with me. So this is Dalton Thomas and Joel Richardson. And once again, I'm saying it's 40 weeks of gestation for the last 2,000 years. And that would be 40 times 50 Jubilee years is 2,000 years. And where are their birth pangs? They're in the 7 years, okay? And so this is the general overview of how they discuss the beginning of the birth pangs. Then specifically, they're saying these are the seals spread out until almost when the wrath comes in. So they argue pre-wrath. So that means, and they're different this way. So they're arguing pre-wrath, and then the trumpets happen very quickly, and the bowls happen almost on top of each other. I argue that that would be chaos, sheer chaos. That's the pre-wrath model. Okay. So here's Mike Bickel, and this is how he argues that the seals start out right here on the second 3.5 years, then the trumpets, then the bowls again. So it's pretty similar. He's arguing a post-trib. So that's Mike Bickel, post-trib. Once again, here's the birth pangs, and this is a hybrid pre-wrath, post-tribulational, and they're saying that the seals go all the way through. And I believe Doug Hamp would be more in this area, which would be that he believes the 6th seal is so significant, and I'm arguing it's survivable. And so, this would be probably closer to where he would be pre-wrath, maybe post-tribulational. Okay. The traditional view. Why is that the traditional view in the upper right-hand side here, where you've got the seals starting out, and then the trumpets, and then the trumpets are the bowls? Why? Why does it work out that way? And what timing? Okay. So, and here's another one, pre-wrath rapture timeline. They're saying the birth pangs are right here. In the first half again, okay? And I find it to be confusing, erratic, and lacking birth pangs. Okay, here's another one. Here's the timeline of the end of times on the lower right. And so they're going to go with the rapture of the church and then the beginning of the birth pangs. You see the similarities now between all of these, okay? Here's another one. This is pre-wrath again. And so they're trying to match up the seals with the trumpets, with the bowls are way at the end here. And so It's just interesting how they try to work them together. Now, there is no timing. This is all guessing, people, because there's no reason to say one comes and then the first trumpet, then two, then the second trumpet. I would find that to be confusing. I really would. Didn't happen with Moses, that's for sure. Okay. And then this one is birth pangs, then destruction, rapture, day of the Lord happens after that. Okay, interesting. So, I mean, if I'm wrong, prove me wrong, and I'll apologize. So this is John Haller's position, which is that the birth, well, he doesn't say the birth pangs, but he does say the seals open up almost throughout the whole thing, and then the trumpets, and then the bowls, and they happen very close to the end here. And then, so this is his chart. He's a smart guy. And so he's saying the first four of the four horsemen of the apocalypse are right there during the first half of the Great Tribulation. Okay, of the tribulation of the 7 years. Okay, here's another one. This is literally right on top of each other. Horrible, and so there's no warning. You're in the birth pangs and you're getting hit by trumpets and bowls. There's no way for you to repent and understand what's going on. You're already in. I think that's chaos, people, okay? And it's not how a human birth would work. And so I would argue that 1 through 7 seals open and magnify, and then the 7 trumpets again, and then during the last 3.5 years the 7 bowls, and so you look for Goshen or Lot's cave to avoid God's wrath against the wicked. You're going to be here surviving. So birth pangs. This is Matthew 24, and we're going to go through them more specifically, verse by verse. But I want to show you how they do sound like the seals. And even the pre-wrath guys agree with me at that point, which is kind of exciting. Okay, so here it is, Matthew 24, one Greek version. There's going to be another one on the next slide here. So it talks about, we're reading left to right, and they mislead you, begin to hear of wars and rumors of wars. Behold, be not alarmed. It is necessary for this to take place, but yet it's not the end. It's not the telos. They will rise up for nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of the birth pangs. So this is in the Greek, and the words again are that are important. Polybos, which would be wars. Telos, as I mentioned, which would be, it's not the end, but the end in telos, if that was actually taken back to the Greek, to the Hebrew, it would be a continuation. It would be to mead in many cases, because there's an ace. Well, no, there really isn't. All right, anyway, it might not. Telos can mean the end or close to it. And then, so famines, limos, seismo, which is seismography, and there's Odeon, the birth pangs. Okay, so those are the words. Now, we're going to look at a different text and see what's going on here, because you can see in Matthew 25, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be limos and loimos. Okay, so why is it different? Well, because it's Greek and there's no continuity with Greek texts. They're all different. Whatever the writer thought was important. And this writer before said, well, I don't think loimos is important. Well, those are pestilent things. So famines and pestilent things. And then oidinon, which is the birth pangs. So the Greek word translates it pestilences as loimos, which can have a broad range of meanings, including sudden fatal epidemics such as the Spanish flu, or the coronavirus. Loimos can also be translated plague, which is an epidemic disease causing a high rate of mortality, such as cardiovascular diseases. Interesting. They're happening right now, people. Furthermore, pestilence is a contagious or infectious epidemic disease that is virulent and devastating. Virulent is marked by a rapid, severe, and destructive course and able to overcome bodily defensive mechanisms, markedly pathogenic, such as cancer. Okay, so once again, this Greek version lists both limos and loimos. Okay, and we're going to learn about them a little bit more here. So first we're going to go look and see if the Old Testament ever has a situation like this. Here's one. This is Jeremiah 42:17, and it will be all the men, the ones putting their face to enter the land of Egypt to dwell there, shall fail by the broadsword. That's a Ramphea sword. We'll talk about that more. That's a supernatural sword. And by famine, there's limo, or limos, and then there's loimos after that, and pestilence, and there will not be for them anyone delivering from the veils which I bring upon them. Now I gave you the Hebrew down below too, so you can see cherev, so that's a sword, okay? So that's the broadsword, Bromphea. By famine, ba ra'av, okay, which is evil, okay, and famine. And then here is the bear, ba the bear, va the bear. So it's and in pestilence or by pestilence, by famine. So the ba in all cases are by or in. And so those are the three words that correspond with those three words up above. So once again, on the right-hand side, Ramphea is a supernatural sword. In the Hebrew, it could be a cherev pifiot, like a mouth sword, a tooth sword. Uh, it's eh, Basically, it's the sword that comes out of Yeshua's mouth in Revelation 19. Okay, limos again, scarcity of harvest, famine, ra'av is a typical word for it in the Hebrew. Loimos is a pestilent fellow, a pest, a cardiovascular disease. The bear is typical for that. Thanatos is death. It could be the bear again, or it could be moot. Therion, small wild animals. Chayot. So there are animal attacks going on right now. So in the Old Testament, we would think about it as small wild animals. In the New Testament, it might be different. So there are also other words, so it doesn't always match Greek to Hebrew. There's another word, there's the god of the pest, Reshef, and pestilence and things like that. So when you see that out there, you have to be aware that Habakkuk and Deuteronomy talk about Reshef. And so you wonder, and also it doesn't really show it very well, but Reshef seems to be carrying items. One might be this long sword. Okay, if that is the Ramphea, then that's very, very interesting. That would be more like a supernatural type of a sword. So just keep it in mind, and you can see especially Deuteronomy there, by hunger, Ra'av, and that's moot, fought against by pestilence, Reshef, and it's once again a god, okay, considered to be a god, and bitter, poisonous one, destruction, Keteb, or Ketev. So these are the gods of the netherworld, the gods of pestilence, things like that. Reshef, the lord of the arrow, which is interesting too, to see the arrow listed. There are four spirits of heaven going out, standing in the presence of the Lord of the whole world. The one with the black horses is going towards the north country, and the one with the white horses towards the west, and the one with the dappled horses towards the south. So these are my rules, that if you see that in Zechariah 6, that it probably applies to Revelation 6, okay? So yeah, it is horses with chariots and just horses in Revelation 6, but it's real similar because you're going to see everything listed but red, but you can assume red is going east if the other directions are listed. And I quoted it in the of all translations. I want to have you laugh a little bit. I'm quoting the NIV, which is not inspired. Why am I quoting the NIV? Because they took the decency of saying to the west. It's the acharith in the Hebrew. And so it's very interesting that they actually wrote west for it, which is acharith is behind you to the west where the sun sets. And so they translated it that way. And of all the translations, they're probably the most accurate at that point in time. They're really not very accurate in many other ways. So I always quote that way. I believe that seal 1 is the west, then seal 2 is the east, seal 3 is north, and once again the white horse, then the red horse, then the black horse. And I believe they're the birth pangs. So I believe that, now this, I have no evidence of anything other than seal 3, but West seems to have occurred as Western civilization has been dying over the last 50 years. So it's from 1967 when Israel returns to Temple Mount. Seal 2 is the Bush-Cheney Wars. Arab Spring occurred 10 years after that. So 9/11 kind of kicked off 10 years of disarray and war, and then Arab Spring kicked off another 10 years. And it's just a nightmare to this day. You have ethnos epi ethnos. You have tribe against tribe in the Middle East, and it's just going everywhere now. So then in 2012, Hurricane Sandy was prophesied. I was there, and so sometime, say beginning after Av 9 of 2012 or during the summertime, you would notice basic food prices increasing over this time for the poor, and they are. I will do a separate video on that, on the third seal, just to explain more about that. But yeah, it was interesting how that was prophesied during Jeroboam's first Sukkot, which occurs in 1 Kings 12. And so that was prophesied. It happened exactly the way it was prophesied. And so I'm going to argue that the third seal is open because the gentleman that prophesied it said that. And he was right about everything else. So I've just a little background information on seal 1, just because we're kind of going through the seals, okay? And so seal number 1, you see that that this particular being has a bow, but he's missing the arrows. And so arrows, if you were King David from this time frame, from his time frame, 3,000 years ago, arrows would mean progeny or swiftness in battle. And that's from the Jewish Virtual Library. And so this is a slow moving thing, because he doesn't have the swiftness of arrows. So this is a slow moving destruction of Western civilization. And once again, I wanted to show you that Dever is considered pestilence again. So once again, that's listed like a demon. So if you're an ancient Israelite, you would realize that the Dever, would be pestilence, and you would be quite aware of it in Greek and Roman demonology. So the people living next door would be that. So my opinion is the first horseman is during the end of days. The first will be a protracted ethnos, epi-ethnos, so ethnic wars, and kingdom during kingdom warfare, hand-to-hand combat in the streets, very slow moving. It's just mayhem and things like that. And then it's going to be slow and painful. Once again, I cite Zechariah 6 as the directions. And so then seal 4 varieties of death stalk the earth. So a little bit more about it. The arrow is familiar in folklore for disease and sudden pain. So just keep that in mind. If he's missing that, there's still disease coming in seal number 4, and sudden pain is not going to be there. It's going to be slow pain. And so it's just interesting. You see a lot of other verses that match up with it, and we'll go through Deuteronomy 32:24 in a little bit. So it's slow, and coming against Western civilization. Okay, so once again, seal number 1, Israeli concession in 1967, just kind of kicked off the West falling apart. And then seal number 2 is when the Bush-Cheney people got together and said, let's start some wars. And then seal 3 was prophesied, and it was Hurricane Sandy, a sign of it. And then seal 4 comes, and seal 4 is 4 different buckets of death that produce 1.9444 billion deaths based on 7.777777 billion people. And so it's the Ramphea again, which is that long supernatural sword. It's Lemos, as we've been discussing a little bit here. It's Thanatos, which is death. It's the name of the 4th seal is death, and he brings death. And then it could be animal attacks or biological animal attacks. Those are the birth pangs. So supernatural sword, famine, death, and then wild animals or biological warfare. COVID could be part of it. So let's go through a few verses here, and then we'll break down the verses individually. They should be wasted with hunger, devoured by plague, and poisonous pestilence. I will send the teeth of beasts against them. The venom of things that crawl in the dust, out towards the sword shall bereave. So these are the big 4 from Deuteronomy 32. Then the big 4 from Ezekiel 14. Thus says the Lord God, how much more will I send upon Jerusalem my 4 disastrous acts of judgment, sword, famine, wild beasts, and pestilence. There's the big 4 right there. Okay. And then the big one is Psalm 91, which is if you're frightened ever, pray this before you go to sleep, and you won't have any problems at all. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks by darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall. Well, that's like the sword. It doesn't say it, but it is. At your side, 10,000 at your right hand. You will tread on the lion and the adder, so the animals, and the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Big 4. So one more time, Lemos is drought, scarcity of harvest, and they're saying here, this is Bloomberg saying 1.8 billion people in 17 countries, or a quarter of the world's population, appear to be veering towards a water crisis. You're seeing this, okay? So drought, scarcity of harvest, famine worldwide, Lemos again, okay? Thanatos, the god of Thanatos, which is death, personification of death. Thanatos was thus regarded as merciless and indiscriminate, hated by and hateful towards mortals and gods alike. And that would be death, the god of death. So, is CV and the jab, are they only one piece of the big 4? Yeah. He stated that these returning plagues are part of the warning. As I stated with Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 91 and Ezekiel 14 and Revelation 6, they're part of the big 4 judgments. These come in waves, and so they're designed to get you to repent. But we aren't doing much repenting. So they're part of the big four plague pie. Okay, the therion piece is therion could be lower forms of animal life, including biological warfare. So let's go into Revelation 6:8. And he opened the seal, the fourth, and heard the voice, the fourth living creature, saying, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. No, it's chloros in the Greek. The one sitting on it, the name was Thanatos, death. And Hades, hell, was following after him. It was given them the authority over the fourth, that's the fourth, of the earth to kill with the sword, that's the Rumphea, and with the famine. It's just limos. It is not both, but sometimes you can see that it depends upon the Greek text that you find. I should try to look and see if there's another one listed. But I doubt it. I think they combine them both together there. And then Thanato. And then Therion at the end there. So you can see all four of those. So you can see the consistency with the big four. Once again, here's Deuteronomy 32 broken down with limo, hunger, Therion, wild beasts, make them childless, which really doesn't say death, but it is death. Okay, Thanatos. And then Mechira is listed there, which is really, I was hoping that it would be a Rumphea, but it isn't, but it's still the big four, with a sword there. And so Loimos is not listed in this case, but it's real close. And the arrows is up there too, so just be aware of that. So that's Deuteronomy 32 broken down in the Greek. So this is the Septuagint. Then here it is in Ezekiel 14, where you'll see the four punishments, and then you'll see the Rumphea listed there in the Septuagint. There's the Limon and Theria, which is close to Theria, not quite the same thing. It's more wild beasts. And then here's plague Thanaton. Okay, and so, and then a little bit more from Ezekiel 14, you see there's Therion again, and there's Limo again. So it's pretty consistent throughout this from the Septuagint. Now this is Leviticus 26, which is the big four, but they come in waves. And so I wanted to show it to you. So I went to my old NIV Bible, and there it is. So the first chastisement is distress. The second chastisement is drought. The third is wild animals. The fourth is plague. The fifth is famine. And the sixth is dispersion. And so it would be limos, because if your skies are iron and your ground is copper, that's limos, people, okay? Then the third one is theria chayot, so it's animal attacks, okay? And wild animals, so chayot in the Hebrew. Then the fourth is plague, and that's Thanatan, and also there's also listed a Mechira in there, which would be Hebrew cherev. And then the fifth is you're eating your children. Well, that's like Thanatos, that's death. Okay, so just keep that in mind. They come in waves, and so it's designed to get us to repent. Seal 4 is coming soon here, if it's not already here. And then Seal 5 is martyrdom. And then Seal 6 is survivable. I list off the fourth seal again here, 1.94444 billion deaths. And then Sfadzo or Shekin in the Hebrew. Sfadzo is the Greek phrase, and that would be martyrdom. And then the sixth seal, according to me, it's not an extinction level event. It's survivable. And you just move on through. So now this is interesting. This is coming from a source that I can't cite publicly. I do give you the link right there from Brighteon, and it's Mike Adams. He's interviewing Dr. Lee Merritt, and she's been around a long time, and she's talking about all sorts of different topics, but I wanted to give you the highlights from this interview. Synthetic DNA makes you less than human, possibly. Recent dog attacks because they don't recognize you as human, okay? So if a dog believed you were human up until you took the couple of jabs, what changed? Are you less than human now, and that's why it attacked you? Babies are not breastfeeding sometimes because mom has had the jabs, and so is she human? Is that what they're rejecting? How do we protect our families from shedding, from sterility, from being depopulated, and what's going to happen in the fall? So very interesting. If you have an hour to give, this is a great interview, and go hit it on Brighteon, and just look for the interview with Lee Merritt from June of 2021. And so I'm arguing that if God created humankind in his own image, the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. What if we're changing creation? And does that make you less than human? So as things move forward, we should see civil wars brew, peace treaties increase, limos and loimos, Deaths hit 1.9444 billion. The Pope meets in Babylon to forge agreements with the ancient spirits that rule the territory of Persia. The Pope forces this Babylonian faith upon the earth. The Antichrist remains quiet until the last 3.5 years. Persecution increases against the believers, which starts many conversions, and martyrdom becomes the norm. Then Yeshua returns at some point in time, quite a few years later. I wanted to show you this just so you could see this is from God's roadmap to the end. It's interesting that he's got a 14-year timetable, timeline. Just interesting to look at. I don't say it matches up exactly, but it's very interesting. I didn't know that such a thing existed. So you need to wear clean garments, so work on staying human and staying clean. We're coming up to a wedding, people. And that's the end. That's the end of our get-together here. And thank you, be blessed, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.